Welcome to a brand new season of Footballers Unfiltered. I'm Joe Hart, and I know what you're thinking, and no, this is not another football podcast. This is a show from FIFPro, the global union for professional football players, bringing you real and honest conversations from players on and off the pitch to you. Now, as a footballer myself, I've been lucky enough to share the pitch with some of the most iconic captains in the modern game. Watching how they lead with passion, presence and purpose was always inspiring for me. One player who absolutely embodies that in football today is Jackson Irvine.
Something I've kind of tried to promote through my career as well is encourage my teammates and younger players to express themselves and be more open. And I like to think that's probably like my leadership style, I guess, has always been to kind of make my teammates more themselves, I guess.
He captains his country and has worn the armband at club level too. But that's not all he is. He's also a co-president of PFA Australia. This means that Jackson is also leading off the pitch, standing up for players and representing them at every level of the game.
Always been a strong believer in unions and player associations and being able to be in a hands-on way to kind of help improve the game, I guess, is the most basic way of doing it. And you can only be part of that conversations when you get involved.
Jackson's a natural leader and one of the game's real characters, which is exactly why we wanted him to kick off the new season of Footballers Unfiltered. So in every episode, I'm joined by a member of the FIFPro team who's working hard to represent footballers all around the world. Today, I'm joined by Shoko Tuji, and I'm going to need to read my cue card for this because Shoko is the Secretary General of FIFPro Asia Oceania, one of the regional divisions of FIFPro. So Shoko, tell us a little bit more about your role in FIFPro.
First of all, thanks for having me, Joe. I'm originally from Japan. I grew up supporting my club, Yokohama F Marinos, which you might know because Ange Postecoglou was with us before going to Celtic.
Of course.
And I'm currently Secretary General of FIFPro Asia Oceania, which represents the professional football players in Asia and Oceania, including Jackson, who will be joining us shortly. And what we do is we support the member unions in our region. We engage with stakeholders like the AFC and OFC, and we tackle regional topics like player workload, extreme heat, conditions around the AFC, OFC competitions, anti-Asian racism, and many more.
How important is it to have current players working in the industry that you're in?
First of all, for us, unions are the players and players are the unions. So they go hand in hand. We wouldn't be able to do our work without the involvement of active players because the game is constantly changing. So we also need to be aware of the current issues that players are being affected by. And I think the biggest mistake we can make as FIFPro is assume that we know the issues that players are experiencing. So that's why it's so important that we have players like Jackson involved in our work.
So Jackson's the co-president of the PFA Australia. It's a really progressive union. What does it mean to have such a strong representation of a union in your region?
It makes such a big difference because you've got to understand that Asia Oceania is one of the most vast, diverse regions in the world. We have so many different languages, religions, time zones. Oof. And it's really difficult to organize players across the region because it's also a region that has culturally been quite resistant to the idea of player unions. Yeah. In some countries, it's even illegal to organize. And just to give you an example, a few weeks ago, we had a player in Indonesia that received a 12-month ban for criticizing the league on social media. Eventually, the ban was reduced to 3 months thanks to the union. But it's just an example of how difficult it can be for players to speak out. And that's why it's so important that we have a union like PFA Australia that is willing to speak out on issues and also share best practices with other countries and raise standards for players across the region.
So some of the countries without the unions, are you getting closer? Are the conversations starting to happen? Are they starting to open up to it?
Yeah, that's one of the things we're working on to build trust, first of all, with players that aren't familiar with the idea of having a union and just show them that we're there. But also seeing players like Jackson, but also other presidents like Maya Yoshida from Japan and Ji So-yoon from Korea, for example, who are also presidents of their respective unions. Yeah. It does give other players who aren't familiar with the union movement confidence that it's a safe place to join and they have support.
So we're going to be joined by Jackson in a minute. You've worked with him previously. What can you tell us about Jackson?
I'm always so impressed by how committed he is to the union movement, how willing he is to speak on behalf of his teammates about issues, and just also how authentic he is as a person. So I'm really excited about the conversation.
No, me too. I'm really looking forward to it. And on that note, we'd love to welcome Jackson to the conversation. So Jackson, delighted to have you here in the studio. Appreciate you making the effort, but currently recovering from a little injury. Any update on that for us?
Yeah, thanks for having me, first of all. But yeah, making really good progress from the injury and hopefully build back in for an exciting new season.
So, not just a footballer, mate, many strings to your bow, fashion, music. What can you tell us about that side of you?
It's kind of been the balance of me, I guess, since I was young. Football's always been the biggest part of my life and my obsession from a young age. And that kind of gets lost sometimes, I guess, a little bit because I have so many other interests. But I've always found that balance has been important. And the best way for me to do that, of course, you've got your family, which is your priority away from the pitch, but having interests and passions that you can explore beside the pitch has not only made me a more rounded person, but I actually think it's made me a better player, especially as I've gotten older.
How did you find that? Because I'm super aware of that, like especially coming towards the back end of my career. Someone like you who's, flamboyant and passionate and artistic, that would have been squashed. And it's such a shame that now I look at it now that it's a dressing room that celebrates the fact that you're a little bit different in the footballing world.
Yeah.
And as the intrigue changed.
Yeah, for sure. I was never scared to kind of push those boundaries as a younger player. And I've found an environment now where I'm, again, almost encouraged to push those boundaries more. Whereas when I was younger, it was just putting a toe over the line every now and again to see what I could and couldn't have in my life in terms of football and away from the pitch. And it takes a long time to have the confidence to go all out. And that kind of comes from establishing yourself more as a player, which is a shame because you shouldn't need to be that, a certain level of player to be able to do that. But that's definitely how it kind of came around in my career for sure.
Yeah, because what you mentioned, I think we still see it in many countries in Asia that players say that it's hard for them to focus on things outside of football or express themselves because there's the expectation of just focus on your football, just shut up and dribble.
Yeah.
But you show a different side of what can be achieved, I think, and it's really important.
And that's been something I've kind of tried to promote through my career as well, as encourage my teammates and younger players to express themselves and be more open. And I like to think that's probably my leadership style, I guess, has always been to kind of make my teammates more themselves, I guess.
Yeah, and I think one of the great conversations and one of the great points is I've got absolutely no doubt you're a better player when you're free, right? When you're expressing yourself, you're not hurting anyone, you're just enjoying everything that life has to offer. And that's a key message to any young player. So keep flying that, man.
Yeah.
Massive. It's massive in a dressing room. And
Speaking of fashion, you have a pretty impressive collection of vintage shirts. Do you have a favorite?
Oh yeah, definitely. A Celtic shirt.
Yeah.
When we arrived for the 2022 World Cup into camp, I came in a Mark Viduka 1999 Celtic shirt. There were so many parts of that shirt which were tied to my life. Obviously, Celtic was, the club that gave me a start in professional football, brought me over from Australia. Mark Viduka, one of our all-time greatest players and legend. And also, it was kind of one of my first viral experiences, kind of pre-World Cup. And that opened me up to a whole community of shirt lovers who I've kind of crossed paths with all over the world and swapped shirts and traded stories and everything. And it's great. It all kind of came from that moment. So I would say that's my favorite.
love that.
You got one?
I think if I could get my hands on one, it would be Pete Schmeichel's that he won the Euros in '92.
Oh, yeah.
With the different coloured dots and the black arms.
That's iconic. That's so 90s as well.
If that could be found with the S. Royce gloves, let me know.
For sure.
You wear the Japan '98 one with the flames really nicely as well.
Yeah. I've got so many Japan shirts. They're our biggest rivals in Asia, but they always have, their shirts have the best aesthetic. Like, I swapped shirts when we played at the last qualifier with Kua Takura, they've got the Y3 sponsor now, like the fashion brand from Adidas. I think it will be like a future classic for sure.
What does being a leader mean to you?
It's been roles that have kind of come to me kind of naturally from a young age. I captained the academy at youth teams at Celtic and been fortunate enough to wear the armband at some point at kind of every club I've been at. To me, leading is all about bringing the best out of the people around you and bringing together all aspects of what it means to be at a club and play football. And that's not just on the pitch for me. That's always existed off the pitch as well. And football is about community. And when you can link all those things together as everything, I feel like you can build something that's like more special than just a normal kind of footballing achievement. And it's more about then culture and how you kind of create an environment where everyone can thrive, rather than actually trying to find that something that everyone can center themselves around.
Yeah, well, we spoke on the phone yesterday, and something that you said, I absolutely loved it. You said being a leader isn't about what you can do, it's knowing what you can't do and how you can get others to help you in that. That line was perfect for me as very much a...
Damn, I used it on the phone.
I was waiting for it to come in then. Yeah, I've very much been, my role, I've been a general for a captain, because it takes more than one guy, right? You've played that role before and you've played the main man. Who is it that you've looked up to in your career, and what parts of people's games and people's captaincies have you taken during your career?
Yeah, there's been several. When we talk about that presence and that kind of mentality and central figure, for me, it was Mile Jedinak with the national team. He was just the epitome of presence, I guess. The way he carried himself, his professionalism, and he was just a calming influence on everybody with his body language and with his and that spoke louder than he ever had to, kind of with his voice. And the other one was Michael Dawson. Yeah. My first year at Hull, never been around somebody with such a radiant energy in the dressing room, and he was part of everything, you know. And that's, you know, I've always admired that about him, and he was someone that I looked up to a lot.
I had Vincent Kompany with me at Manchester City.
I was about to ask who was that for you, do you think?
He came over from Hamburg, and I think he was only 20 when he signed for Manchester City. And he came in, and he's a very knowledgeable guy, intelligent guy, huge presence, and he was different, and he wasn't afraid to be different. He was really, really set on being himself. And during a period where at Manchester City things got a bit wild, you know, there was a lot of money coming in, there was a lot of good players, a lot of brilliant players, a lot of people. We had quite a volatile coach in Mancini who wasn't afraid to clash with people. And it was all just kind of a bit of a storm, and we were doing well, but that was the only thing that was holding us together. And then Vincent just kind of rose up, put himself on the line, took the captaincy. But that was a really interesting part of my career, and I learned a lot from that.
Yeah, that conflict resolution that you mentioned there is a big aspect of it as well. And when you're dealing with egos, which exist in football, and at the level that you played at, that must even be heightened, you know, to a degree. And to have someone like that can, as you say, put himself in the center of that and calm those situations and find resolutions in those difficult moments, like that is a very difficult skill, and it takes diplomacy. You know, it's probably where that comes from.
The thing that I'm finding the older I get, that often, you know, if someone's not happy with something, they're often right. And the person, example, the manager, they're often right too. So they're right about the same thing, but they're totally not. And you've got to find some way of saying, look, football is obviously full of people with strong egos and will back themselves no matter what.
Yeah, I think we underestimate the importance of listening, because when I first joined FIFPro too, they said you should spend 20% of your time talking and 80% of your time listening to players, because that's how we do our work to get feedback from active players.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, Jackson, so inspiration on the pitch. I'm going to have to go at my cue card for this, because also we have FIFPro Global Players Council, and you're co-president of the Australian PFA. Talk to me.
Yeah, it's two roles that I'm very proud to be a part of. Always been a strong believer in unions and player associations, and being able to be in a hands-on way to kind of help improve the game, I guess, is the most basic way of doing it. And you can only be part of that conversations when you get involved. And fortunately, it's led to me being able to be involved in these two roles. I
knew nothing about unions or anything like that as a player, and it's all coming to light to me now, and it's super impressive that all this stuff is in place. At an early age, was it in Scotland? Was it because you felt like you were a little bit isolated? You just wanted to know that people were there for you? Is that how you got into that sort of thing?
I think my politics are well known for anyone who's probably watching this, but it wasn't until I kind of got more involved in the national teams that I really became aware of how much change you can actually make through these organizations. And it was through our PFA. I remember it was a kind of big moment for me in 2015. It was my second call up for the national team. I think it was in Perth and in an October window. And it was during our collective bargaining negotiations with the federation for the upcoming national teams. And this was when we were pushing hardest for the gender equality agreement, which we've managed to instill ever since. And I remember the players all agreed to do a media blackout for this window. This was my second call-up. I was 22. And, I just remember the amount of pressure that you can apply as players when you're together and when you have a clear vision of something that you want to achieve, what can be done. And the fire was lit kind of within me from that. I was like, wow, this is like, you want to make real change within a workplace, you can do it. You can bring people together and make it happen.
So these sorts of roles you generally associate with players that are retired and more time on their hands, if you like, without the professional pressure. How do you manage your time to do both?
Listen, it takes time. Talking from the Australian Association's perspective, we've got amazing full-time staff that do amazing work when it comes to everything that we want to kind of instill within the organization. And then I've sat on the executive board for a few years and fortunate now enough to be co-president. And, and then you get to see kind of the great work that they do throughout the year in small steps, and we can implement that into the game that we want to see moving forward.
Yeah, I was wondering, because as co-president, how do you make sure that you represent the needs of the Socceroos, the midfielders, also the players in the A-League men, A-League women, and make sure that every single voice is heard?
Yeah, we've got a fantastic blend with myself as, national team player and, playing overseas. And then my co-president, Tamiki Allop, plays in the A-League women's and the Matildas as well. So we've kind of got all bases covered within the leadership aspect. We only just decided to change our leadership structure last year to include a co-president because we felt it was the right way forward for us having a male and female president. We've kind of have all of those relationships with players that play overseas, national teams, and in the domestic leagues within that. And then on our player executive, we've also got players that play domestically, internationally, and with the national teams as well, and ex-players, because, retirement and post-football is also a big part of what we try to do with helping players plan post-career and also give players post-career support, whether it be financially for education grants and things like that, and transitioning out of the game too.
What would you say to any current players listening who've got similar beliefs and similar ideas to you and similar aspirations? How would they get into something like this?
Don't underestimate the power of the unions and the help that's there for you, whether it can come in so many different forms. As I said, I think players aren't just probably aware enough of the tools at their disposal when it comes to things like education, mental health support, player safety, whatever that looks like to you. You need to find out who your player representatives are or your staff members, and someone will be there to support you, because ultimately that's why our associations exist, is to support the players. That's the primary objective of any union, is to support its workers.
Tell us about some of the issues that you face that people who aren't necessarily behind the curtain, they wouldn't realise are going on.
The modern problems are becoming more and more spoken about and more relevant when it comes to things like mental health support. I think, we've seen through our studies and data with our union that when on offer, it is overwhelmingly used when offered to players when they're aware that it exists, and that's for players and families. Player safety is a constant issue that we're trying to address, and of course and that's on and off the pitch as well when it comes to social media and everything like that as well. And obviously player workload, of course, is one of the biggest and most talked about issues in the game at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of player workload, as a Europe-based player playing in the AFC Confederations, I imagine there's a lot of travel involved for you. How's that for you?
Yeah, I think, having seen some of the data that FIFPro put together over the last 12 months, I think me and a couple of the Australian national team players were kind of in that top 10 of most traveled players over the last 12 months. And it's demanding and it's difficult, but it also is, especially when it comes to international football, it's seen as a worthwhile investment in terms of physically and mentally, of course, for what you're trying to achieve. But as we see more and more competitions expand, as we see more and more competitions brought into existence, the games continually increase. The demand now is higher than ever physically of what you're asked to invest on the pitch.
I don't know if you're a cricket man, but you know, I see with all the different franchises and the different 50 over format, 20 over format, I can just see some different contracts coming into the game. There needs to be some sort of way of managing a squad and not putting that demand on a player, because you know what you're like. Look at you coming back from an injury now. You know, you're targeting the second game of the season. You just want to be in there. So you never want to give an inch as a player. You need people to take that away from you, take it off the table. You are not available for 10 games a season. That's just the rules. 99% of them will put themselves forward. I did it many, many times when I wasn't fully fit. I was fit enough to function, but I wasn't fully fit. So I just think it needs to be taken out of the players' hands, and that's where the unions and those decisions and, you know, ex-pros and things like that are going to be absolutely priceless.
Yeah, and the data that we collect over this period is going to be so important, and it's a great thing that FIFPro and also the PFA do is encouraging players to engage in that and give feedback constantly, and that's how you are able to gauge, you know, exactly what you're asking of players.
Yeah, I think so. So you played the majority of your football in the UK, and now you're in the Bundesliga. How did you find that transition? What have you noticed about the change in, you know, a fellow European country, but must have been a huge culture shock? Yeah,
absolutely. Maybe not so much on the day-to-day life aspect of it, but certainly from the footballing element, you know, coming from playing in the championship, 46 games, rolling in game into game, very little training. You know, the actual day-to-day of the football is very different. There's a way higher focus on the training loads in Germany, and being able to do way more, much more tactical work, which I think has been probably the reason where I'm now at 32 playing at the highest level I've ever played at, because I think that's something I've always needed and thrived on, is information. And we're in the information age of football, as we all know now, with tactical data and everything like that. And I think that's definitely helped me improve. But of course, the biggest shock is culturally the way that football is treated in Germany compared to in the UK, and the fan culture, and there's elements of life in football that kind of coexist in Germany in a totally different way to the UK, as I'm sure you found when you went to Italy. Like the culture around the sport is as much the change as the day-to-day of football itself. Yeah, that was certainly something that I noticed. I went from, in the UK, it's more about the numbers. You know, often the crowd will be sold out. I know it is in the Bundesliga, but when I went to Serie A, the numbers weren't necessarily there, but the passion and the expectancy to just represent the club. I was at a club, Torino, they weren't fighting for Champions League, they weren't fighting to win the league, but you had to represent the club. Like, there was an awful lot on that badge. And me personally, I absolutely love that. That is what I live for. And the clubs that I've been at, where it's been a club that just wants to, you know, is a good business, for example, give me a badge to represent all day, every day. I watched an interview you did with Mark Schwarzer recently, talked about being able to mingle with the fans, walking to the games. It seems like a really unique place to play football, and a really good fit for you. Yeah, it's funny. It's when I talk about my career and the way it's kind of found its path, and for me to ultimately land in St. Pauli in a community where, you know, I can live a 4-minute walk from the stadium and walk home after a Bundesliga match is unique. I don't think there's many.
Is that just you that's chosen to do that, or is that common in the team?
No, it's just me. It's kind of been part of the foundation of what I've built, kind of on and off the pitch there too.
Yeah.
I probably would have chosen to live in an area like St. Pauli anyway, even if I wasn't, you know, playing for the club, just because it kind of fits with my lifestyle. It's the kind of central hub of diversity, arts, culture, everything that kind of I find interesting about life. So it just naturally meant that that's where me and my wife wanted to locate ourselves and put ourselves. And as I said, we've been embraced by that. And yeah, we're in a place that's not quite like any other, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's truly unique. I mean, Joe, could you have imagined walking to the stadium or getting on public transport to the training ground when you were playing?
I could have when I was young, when I didn't think. Obviously, I did in my first team. That was what I was from. I was from the town, from Shrewsbury. I used to get the bus to games and stuff like that. But I just think you can get wrapped up in football, right?
Yeah.
And some of the stuff you're doing is not groundbreaking. It's really not. It's really normal. It's normal for everyday people and people who go about and people who work at the highest end of certain businesses when they're not necessarily well known. But I love it. So look, we know life's not rosy. You know, there's some bad people out there, especially in football, being so open as you are, accommodating, ready to speak up. Have you had any tough experiences with that?
Absolutely. Many times throughout my career with players in dressing rooms when I've tried to be more open about certain things, especially in the early years around like pride and things like that.
Yep.
It can come from just people on the internet who want someone to shout at. And it can even come from within your own fan base. And, and even in places like St. Pauli, who are an incredibly politically active club, I've had clashes and continue to have disagreements with fans and people within the club about, strong issues that exist in the world socially and to do with football as well. So you have to be able to, listen again and recognize that people have other opinions and there is no kind of right way. But I suppose the spaces where I don't budge is when it comes to things like human rights, when you're not talking about non-negotiables. And that's where the clashes really come, I guess, because that's when the fire lights up within me too. And that's when you really want to, be not push, but present what, is people's basic human rights.
Yeah, when it comes to the abuse, we all know that 9 times out of 10 it comes online because people aren't equipped enough to come and actually have a problem with you about some of the things that you're talking about because they like to hide behind things. How do you find that? Yeah,
listen, as I said, I'm very present on social media as well. As I'm sure a lot of people know, I share a lot of parts of my life. I'm happy to do so. I think that's the beauty of social media, to give people that window into kind of what is real life. I do think that there's a long way to go to be able to make those spaces safer, especially for younger players who are far more impressionable.
Yeah, I remember after the Asian Cup last year, the Socceroos actually posted a statement condemning the abuse that a few of the players received. Right?
Yeah, it's been unfortunately regular part of my career that it's in terms of not for me but for teammates in particular, and you just want to be able to support them through those kinds of difficult moments.
When you're dealing with problems, when you're dealing with backlash, or a lot of it's so disingenuous, it's just words, it's just stupidity. And if someone's willing to come up to you and speak to you about something and check you on something and ask a question, engage. Like you say, you got to be able to listen, you got to be able to have a conversation, you got to understand that you're not always right. You're not always right. And you are able to hear other people's opinions. You might not agree with them, but at least you can hear it. But I think anything outside of that bracket, leave it be. Let those people do whatever they need to do to get it out of their system. So on a lighter note, World Cups.
Yeah.
2006, you went as a fan, right?
I was indeed, yeah. That was my first World Cup experience.
And then Qatar, you're facing Argentina, France, Messi's, Mbappe's. Talk to me about how that makes you feel as a football fan.
Yeah, for all the stuff we talk about now and the passions and how strongly I feel about these things, times like that, the World Cup is when that is still what lights me up more than any of that stuff. Ultimately, I am a footballer and this is what I've dedicated my life to. And to be able to have that opportunity to play at the highest level and it's a culmination of everything else you do in your life kind of comes in that moment. And the pride that I feel to be a part of a group that has been there twice, now a third time after recent qualification. Yeah, so hopefully I will be there in a year's time for number 3. It's absolute dreamland stuff. It's tough to put into words. I was in that stadium in 2005 when Australia qualified for the first time in 32 years as a 12-year-old. And then I was in Germany in 2006. And as I said, these kinds of moments in my life of funny how they've weaved together. I was in Australia versus Brazil 2006 group game in Munich, watching Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Kaká. And then, last year I led my team out as captain in the Allianz, playing in the Bundesliga. You have these kind of full circle moments in that same stadium, and I'm very, very fortunate to have kind of been able to have those opportunities. But yeah, those in particular, that 2022 World Cup, it's hard to even put it into words. It was like and not even a completion because I'm more than ready to go again. But just ultimately, we know that we gave an absolute level of maximum heart, mentality, physicality, what we did in that tournament to achieve our highest ever finish as a nation, and ultimately losing to the world champions. There's no shame in that. So
how was the drama in that game? Talk to me, because that's levels, right? And I'll be honest, of all the questions, I'm very intrigued to know about you, but that one lit me up to be able to ask that question and talk about this with you as someone who I know has loved football, but like in it, mate, in it, when the world's watching, representing your country at the highest level in chaos. Talk to me.
I remember when the 2022 World Cup rolled around, I think we were 14th in the second league in Germany at the time.
Yeah.
You know, we were on a really bad run, and then there was no build up for that World Cup. There was no pre-camps. There was no thing. It was there for 5 days, and then it's gone against the reigning world champions in a few days' time. And that like kind of preparation is just like something completely different. And the level of player you're talking about, as you say, it changes games instantly from the kind of focus you have to have for 90 minutes, but also there's like an acceptance of knowing that there are going to be moments that are totally out of your control, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And it's not just prayers up, but also it's a bit like, you know, you're just so reliant on your teammates and everyone else. It has to be so collective to even have the possibility. And I think one of the best moments of my career, we went 1-0 up in that game against France, and after like 10 minutes, I remember standing in the corner and we're all looking at each other, and I said, we're going to win it.
Yes.
I said, we can't be stopped.
Yeah.
Who can beat us? We got beat 4-1.
That part of the story doesn't have to.
Still, yeah, it was unbelievable. Unbelievable. And as you say, the little man on the day against Argentina. What can you say? That's the difference. And ultimately it was the difference, not just for us, for the whole tournament.
Yeah.
And you have your own experiences with him, don't you?
Yeah, man. Is that the best player you've ever played against?
By a country mile. For so many different reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, we're often in this kind of Ronaldo and Messi debate, and I hate giving one because you almost want to just talk about the other one. My answer is Messi, of course, but that's not because Ronaldo's not unbelievable. Lionel Messi, when I've played against him, I don't know about your team meetings, but we were a good team, Manchester City playing Barcelona, really good team. And you couldn't help but the conversation was just about him. How are we going to stop him? What's it going to be like? And then when he steps up and plays on that level, you need superstars in the game, right? You need superheroes, and he certainly is that.
But that Messi aura that you talk about, that singular focus before the game. Funny story, our coach refused to say his name, our coach Graham Arnold. We did our meetings, our tactical meeting the day before, and he just kept calling him the number 10.
You got to find a way.
Literally, and we were just like, you know the number 10, he likes to come in on his left. And it's like, yeah, I know he likes to come in on his left, mate. I've been watching it for 20 years. The first half of that game summed him up for me because, you know, everyone goes on about the walking, the looking like lack of interest, but he's analyzing.
Yeah.
He's watching. He's watching behaviors. He's finding space. And for 43, 42 minutes, we were in that game completely. We were there. We were present. We had our tactical plan. It was deep, but we were there. And then, you know, it's a wide free kick. It's a moment of you lose shape and he smells it. And he comes to life. And you see, he knows they're not looking at me now because it's a different phase of the game, and he lights up and doesn't lash at it, for anyone who's seen the goal, he doesn't smash it.
Nope.
He just rolls it in the corner like he's done nearly 1,000 times. And it's how do you have such singular focus for a guy, and he still finds a way. And that's why he's, as I said, for me, he's the greatest, because it's about those moments.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Is that one of your career moments?
Oh, saving his penalty.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly. And I don't know about you, but there's two versions of me. There is the hardened professional who believes I should be out there. I don't care what anyone says. I'll go and goal against anyone. I'll play for anyone. And I will fight and I'll stand my ground and I'll back my abilities. But there's also like a kid who grew up just playing football from Shrewsbury with no real hopes, no real ambitions. I just loved it. And then to make a save against him in a penalty in a Champions League, there's special moments, right? That you stand and you say it proudly. So that's
the romance in the game, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. But I think it's important that we have this conversation, mate, because it'll be easy to do your research on you, and it's fighting for this and involved in that and this membership, that. But you're only doing it because you love the game and you want other people to enjoy it. You want other people to light up like I lit up when you asked me that question. So. Yeah. No, what you're doing is great, mate. Yeah. Definitely keep it up. So speaking of those special moments, World 11 Awards, Casemiro. Talk to me about that, because I think everyone's seen it. But how was that whole interaction from your point of view?
You walk in the door and you see these faces and legends of the game and current legends of the game. And, you know, it was intimidating, obviously, first of all. But so I'd come downstairs to give a little interview about the World 11 and discuss the players involved. And we were kind of halfway through the interview and they were like to me, "Oh, Jackson, really sorry, but the last player from the World 11 has just arrived, so we're just going to do his interview quickly." And I was like, "Oh yeah, like go for it. Like I'll just step back." And I was like, I just said like, "Oh, who is it? Can I watch?" And they were like, "Yeah, it's Casemiro." So I was like, "Oh, great." So I went to the corner and then he came in, he sat down, did his interview. I was just kind of watching away. And I thought, if you're going to like speak to someone, this would be a good kind of moment to do it and play with Man United leanings, apologies, from my childhood. You grew up in Australia in the 90s, mate. We didn't have, all we had was Becks. That's all, as you can tell. So I went over to him and, you know, just said hello and shook his hand. I was like, "Yeah, mate, can I grab a quick photo?" And just as we were leaving, he kind of, something like lit up in him and he kind of was like, "Yeah, you play for Australia, don't you?" I was like, "Yeah." Cool. And he was just like, "Oh yeah." And then that was it. And then to be kind of in the presence of a guy who's won 4 or 5 Champions Leagues, one of the greatest midfielders of his generation, to just a small acknowledgement was obviously, the fan in me just lit up, and it was a special moment. I'm glad it's on camera because I don't think my mates would have believed me otherwise.
Yeah, I was lucky to witness that moment with Casemiro, and I mean, I think you were a bit confused at the beginning.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, after a while, like it was just such a beautiful moment of like mutual respect and recognition.
Gotcha.
You'd have impacted him in some way. Like he'd have appreciated the way that you played and, you know, watching the Socceroos and stuff like that. But the higher I've gone, the more I've realised that everyone's just pretty normal people.
Yeah.
Like football fans ultimately at heart.
Yeah, definitely. And like I had experiences that night as well as the night went on. And I remember I was with my wife and Virgil van Dijk came in.
Yep.
And me and Virgil crossed paths very briefly when I was at Celtic. Yeah. Like I was a young player in the kind of fringe first team as he came in. Then we played against each other a few times in Scotland, and that was like 10 years ago or something like that. And you know, I came in, he was with his family and his 2 kids, and he was just like, "Oh, Jacko, how's it going, mate?" Like, came up and shook my hand, and my wife was like, "That's the most beautiful man I've ever seen in my life." And I said, "You are correct." And he was just like, "Oh, like, where you at now? Like, how's it going?" And we just had like a little chat, and I was just like, as if, like, what the hell? Like, just, you know, these little moments are what makes it in football, as you say, and it goes a long way. Who's starstruck you? One in particular, who was like the first time, or was there one that you were like, had a moment where you were like, "Nah, that can't be right"?
My moment, and there was big build up to this, was when we were playing Gigi Buffon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love the way he played, love the way he talked, love the way he behaved, but I'd never met him. And you can't help but be like, surely he's not that cool a guy.
Yeah.
And I finally met him in the tunnel, and he embraced me and called me by my name, and that was just enough. That was enough.
That's it, isn't it?
And it absolutely lit my world up. And then look, I know that he takes his role seriously, especially in my world as a goalkeeper. Mm-hmm. He knows a lot of people look up to him, and I've watched him ever since. And I've watched how he is with everyone. Yeah. You know, it doesn't matter who they are. I watched how he is with everyone. He knows he can make people feel special. And that's why he's my absolute number one.
That's really cool. Love that.
Right, so Jackson, before we let you go, on Footballers Unfiltered, we like to ask a few quick-fire questions. And I'm going to start off with quite a hard-hitting one first. Yeah. What would you say to anyone, player, non-player, who's suffering in silence?
Believe that the support is there, and it's not weak to seek that support. It's strength. You will be embraced and helped by those people.
Love that. Okay, now I'm looking for your favourite moment ever as a professional footballer.
Oh, wow. I've got a few. Lifting that trophy last year from the second league to get promoted to the Bundesliga was, one of the most and special. But I think I'll have to say when we beat Denmark at the World Cup in 2022 to go to the last 16, that feeling of winning a game of that magnitude against that level of opposition, to play against, to know that what was waiting for us in the next round was, that was like overwhelmingly emotional in like a positive way. Yeah, that was my favorite moment.
Love that, and there's room for more.
Yeah.
And lastly, my favorite question of them all is, what do you love about being a professional footballer?
Wow. Yeah. So hard to find a quick fire answer to a question like that. But I would just say the connections that it builds in your life, the people I've been lucky to meet and the experiences I've been able to have for myself and my family, and the world that it's opened up for me, I'm so grateful for. There are so many things about football that are great, but I think the world that it exposes you to, I think, is ultimately what I enjoy most about it.
Love it. Well, Jackson, thank you very much for sharing your story today. We really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
So I absolutely loved that chat with Jackson. What a guy. Really interesting, really passionate, really driven. But what stood out to you about it?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. It was a really interesting conversation. I think we already knew what a great player he was, but what stood out today is what a great union leader he is, captain, but also just what an authentic human being. You could really tell that he loves football. He's very much still a fan, and he retains that side in him, and he embodies it so well. And I think that stood out the most for me.
Oh, I agree. Really impressive guy. And what I love learning in the conversation is why he does it. You know, very selfless. And ultimately, like you talked about there, he just wants the best for the game that he absolutely adores, and he wants everyone to enjoy it just as much as he does.
Yeah, absolutely. And he also talked about his journey, about how he wasn't able to express himself as well at the beginning of his career. It's a journey he's gone on. And I think that's something a lot of players can learn from, because I think we still see in many countries in Asia that it's not so easy for players to engage in football activities off the pitch, for example, or express themselves as freely as Jackson does. So I think that whole conversation would have inspired them quite a lot.
Yeah, there's no doubt he's got a really important role in football.
Yeah.
But I'm from a dressing room very much where people didn't quite know how to do that. They didn't know how they were represented. They didn't know that they could be able to have an opinion or ask questions. How would a modern day player go about getting in contact with its unions?
First of all, I would encourage them to follow us on our social channels. And if you don't have a union, reach out to us directly, either via our social media channels or via email at players@fifpro.org. And someone from our team will reach out. But just, I think most importantly, know that you have a voice and your voice is powerful and you're not alone. We're here to support you.
And if not, just message Jackson and he'll sort it.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining me on the new season of Footballers Unfiltered, a show brought to you by FIFPro, sharing real conversations between players on and off the pitch to you. Footballers Unfiltered is recorded at the Spotify studios and is available on all podcast platforms, so hit follow wherever you're listening. And for the full up-close and personal experience, you can watch every episode on Spotify. I'm Joe Hart. This has been Footballers Unfiltered. See you next time.